There we are. Welcome to Comic Book Radio. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. This is episode 55. Tonight, my guest is Aldous on the Farm. I wonder if his name really is Aldous. Ara in the chat. What's up, Ara? Hope you're doing well. Says, hi, all. What's up, Pete? You awesome person? What's up, Ara? Hope you're doing good. Eric Grant, hey, what's up, man? Hope you're doing well, too. Thank you for joining us tonight. American Comics Company, hey, what's up? We got Aldous there in the chat. And we got Eric Grant again saying hello, which is good. We got Raiden Radio here, too. What's up, Raiden? Jefferson Roswell in the chat. Hello tonight. Hope you're doing well. We got Jay from Desolate Studios here. Hey, Jay. Praetor 7. Hope you're doing good, too. Thank you for joining us. Fritzy Schnitzel. What's up? Hope you're doing well. All right. So we are going to be talking about all kinds of comic book related things tonight. Taking a walk down memory lane, which seems to be the expertise of my guest tonight. So without further ado, let's bring on the man of the hour, and that would be one Mr. Aldous.
Hey, Pete. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Absolutely, man. I'm a huge fan of Alterna, huge fan of what you're doing over here on both your channels, and just it's an absolute honor to be on with you and chatting about a topic that's this important.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, you know, I'm usually talking a lot about independent comics and what people are up to, what they're making, things like that. But it's good to take a look back and see what's what. To commemorate the occasion, I've brought out a small sampling of comics I had as a kid.
Oh, nice.
So we could take a look at some of those tonight, including the one that I can remember as my very first one, which was this Spectacular Spider-Man issue. It's seen
awesome.
better days, and all the faces have been colored in. My mom wrote my name on it.
Of course.
You know, what else? What else do you need when you're a kid? And that's a sentimental comic there for me. Among all the rest are just as dog-eared and weird and all destroyed, but well loved, I guess you could say. But man, you got a channel where you're talking about a lot of things like this in terms of taking a look back at comics and pop culture in general. What's your interest in all of that? What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, before you even get to comics, I'm more of a pulp guy than a comics guy. But I've grown up forever as a comics fan, and I've always been drawn to. In fact, you mentioned you usually highlight more of the indie side of things. The era that I love of comics, arguably they are indie. When you're talking the golden age and the early silver age, these are not huge mega corporations. They're small guys that are struggling, fingers on the concrete, gripping every inch they possibly can. That's the era I love. I love it when these guys were on 2 or 3 books, and books would appear and disappear within a quarter, because they just didn't make it. And it was no holds barred. It was throw anything at the wall, pull anybody in. Let's do revolutionary things. Let's try it if it hasn't worked. And arguably that mindset comes from where all these guys were inspired by, which was the pulps and the comic strips that they read as kids in the 20s and the 30s. And so, you know, the more I kind of did my research and, you know, read more and more history on comics, the more and more I drifted back to that nascent, beautiful Halcyon day of comic strips. Guys like Alex Raymond, guys like Hal Foster, that are the grandfathers of this movement. I mean, today we praise Eisner and, you know, Ditko and Kirby, and rightfully so. But what everybody forgets is those guys were inspired by others, and those others are the giants whose shadow is still cast today. You know, you got characters that people love today, like Etrigan, the demon, who was created by Jack Kirby. That was sourced 100% from one Hal Foster scene in Prince Valiant. that Kirby saw it, was inspired, and basically copied the whole design over and created Etrigan. And so that character's got this beautiful history that goes all the way back to 1937. It's beautiful. You can't talk about one without talking about the other, and it's just, I love it. It's just an endless roadmap that there's little nooks and crannies that you can get trapped down, and then you're down that rabbit hole for 2 months researching something that you had no idea existed. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think people forget that a lot, about what they're inspired by, in terms of who the creators are and things like that. And they forget that those people were also inspired by others and other works too. And it's kind of cool to look up and look into some of those inspirations and really kind of learn more about what inspired the people who inspired you.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about what I'm doing over, and the show is The Gutter, and it's at YouTube /@ the_gutter, GUTTER. And the tagline for the show is, it's the gutter. Everybody ends up here eventually. It's only a matter of time. And there's a reason for that. Because if you're reading a comic book, when you go from one panel to another, you pass through the gutter. So by reading a comic, you're going to end up there eventually. So it's a little bit of a throwback to what's kind of an archaic term, I've noticed. Modern people don't seem to call them gutters anymore, but I still call them a gutter.
Is it problematic? Is that why?
It might be, but that's the beautiful part, is you've got the double entendre of that it is also the gutter. It is, anything goes. I've got no rules for the show. As far as I know, I'm the only interview show where I reach out to my guest after they've come on and I said, okay, pick the topic. And they pick the topic that's the most inspirational for them, that led them down the path where they are now. Because like I said, that's what interests me. I want to know why you're doing what you're doing. I've already seen you on 15 other interviews talking about your book. I want to hear what inspired you to make the book. And so you get great topics. We've talked about everything from a small New England band that had concept albums telling a multi-generational story of one family, to talking with Aerith of Brian of Aerith and the Gway, and man, he was waxing poetic about what the never-ending story meant to him, and how that magical fantasy journey inspired him, and was the seed that was planted at a young age for what became Aerith Saga. And so by learning that about these characters, or about these creators, it gives you this greater level of depth underneath them. And so they, instead of just being an avatar or a face on your screen, they actually become a person. And you start being able to understand a little bit about why they're doing this and where their passion lies.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And for those that are interested, both of the links to Aldous's channels are in the description of the show. So you guys can go click on those, easy peasy, and go subscribe.
Yeah, and then my main channel is predominantly old-time radio. I take old radio shows from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. I clean them up digitally, balance all the audio out, take as much as I can. I mean, some of them are pretty hard to fix. And then do like a little, probably 2-minute intro talking about the history and reference of what that episode means, who's in it, why it's important. And I just upload them for fun. I'm never going to be able to monetize it. It's not anything I do for any gain. I just do it because I absolutely love and treasure those radio shows.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. I mean, it's funny to me because we're kind of in a world now where there's so many podcasts, there's so many shows. I mean, heck, if you guys are watching this, it's very similar, and I know a lot of people listen as opposed to watch, which is perfectly fine too. But it's like we're reinventing the world of radio all over again, And just like everything else, it's cyclical, and things come back around again, and nothing's ever truly dead. It just maybe it reinvents itself, and it might not replace or repeat, but it often, will rhyme. And I think we're kind of doing that this generation in terms of getting around to all of this kind of stuff. It's interesting, and I love listening to various interviews and people talking about their expertise or their inspirations or their own life story, whatever it may be. It's odd because there was a time where I despised stuff like this. There's a time where I was like, podcast? Ugh, I don't want to go on a podcast. Can I just write you an email, and just fill out an interview? And the very thought made me go, man, all right, I guess we're going to do one of those. We're going to do one of those. And now here I am, running one, basically. So it's interesting. You know, I've come around to it, and it's become something that in one way, shape, or form, I don't think I go a day without listening to something like that. And all I could think is the amount of people back then that was their, relatively speaking, one of their only sources of entertainment outside of reading or whatever. It's crazy to see that we've come back again.
Oh no, and I think everything, like you said, everything is cyclic, and everything will come back. I mean, bell bottoms came back. If anything shouldn't have come back, it was bell bottoms, but they came back. So if they can come back, everything's going to have a cycle to it. But where that cycle hits, it never hits that apex that it culturally had before, right? So each time it's present, it's there. Now, this time it's a little bit different because we are in such an active age. Everybody's busy. You're always doing stuff. And a podcast is something that you can, especially with smartphones, right? I mean, you can listen to it in your car. When you turn your car off, you can walk and you can take your phone with you and still listen to it.
Entertainment.
So, exactly. So, and there's so much knowledge that you can share across in something like that. And if you look at what guys like Joe Rogan or Concrete or any of these big podcasts that are doing, I mean, I think the entire population of single or white women in their 30s are single-handedly keeping like the murder mystery, true crime stuff alive and well because it's just so engaging. And it is a return to old-time radio, but it's with a modern twist. You're not sitting at home and captivated in front of the vacuum tube yellow glow of that radio, of that zenith dial. It's there, but you can take it with you. And also there's a certain comfort to it because you can control it. You can turn it on and off. It's not like every other entertainment avenue that's beamed into you. And, if you want to watch a show, you can't, like, if you want to watch The Witcher, let's say The Witcher just drops on Netflix. If you can't watch any YouTube because everywhere there's going to be spoilers. But with a podcast, there's none of that. You can press pause and nobody's going to ruin what happens at the rest of it for you because it's just not that, it doesn't have that cultural reach. So I think there's an aspect of that. And there's the escapism side of it, and that you can just, sit back in a chair, close your eyes, and lose yourself in a story being told, whether that story is informative or fictional or narrative.
Yeah, audio books and everything too. I think the busier we get, the more we're doing stuff, the more it's a bit easier to sink into a lot of this background passive entertainment. Reading is active. You got to be there. You can't. You got to read what's in front of you. Video games, active form of entertainment. Even movies can kind of blend because I'll have movies on in the background a bunch of the times because of the audio, especially if I've seen them before. But it's interesting, and I find that that's something too that we're seeing, not just a revival of that kind of stuff, but we're seeing a revival in the ways that we tell stories and how we tell them again too. I think we're getting out of the woods a bit. There's been a rough patch for about 20 or so years, and as much as there's a lot of the doom and gloom of storytelling that's running around in terms of the mainstream and things like that, I think overall what we're seeing is a lot of independents that are bringing back the mindset of what you're talking about too, with your, the pulp stuff and that golden age of comics where it felt like you had to create, you had to adapt to what was working and what wasn't, and sort it out quickly, and it really spurned a lot of stories and characters, and many of which became iconic. And I think we're starting to see that happen again. I know this kind of thing is really difficult to see when you're in the process of it, but and it sounds like you are also a student of history, seeing the different beats picking up, it really feels like this is the start of something that's going to be coming. And then, 50, 60 years from now, we can look back and go, we were there at the start.
No, for sure. And, and I think it's been artificially extended. These are the kind of things that we're experiencing right now that used to happen every 20 to 30 years. When you look back in history, in the 30s, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers are huge. Through the late part of the 40s, through the late part of the 30s, the 1940s, and then as the 50s, pulp started dying, comics have a huge drop. Books became real big. Sci-fi, the dime store novels. Then you get a resurgence of Tom Swift and all these other, you got Isaac Asimov and all out of the pulp sci-fi guys that cut their teeth in pulp. Now they're writing novels. And so that kind of takes the cultural zeitgeist for a period of time. And then moving into the 60s, you get a resurgence of comic books a little bit. But then also Flash Gordon's kind of gone. I mean, Al Williamson brings him back famously in a comic in the 70s, but it's post Star Trek. Star Trek rejuvenates Flash because there's a resurgence in sci-fi because Star Trek was on. And so then you see sci-fi take a bump, and then Star Wars comes out. Now there's another resurgence. And then the same thing in the 90s, they brought the Shadow back after multiple times of trying to reboot the comics.
Star Wars has such a Flash Gordon inspiration in the feel of it that it literally brings Flash Gordon back to the movies.
Exactly.
With the 1980 Flash Gordon.
And Buck Rogers to television during the same era. So, and then you see Doc Savage. He's constantly being brought back and cycled. And again, it's that cycle period. But speaking of all those characters are arguably culturally dead. They don't have resonance within your average normal person's life. They don't know who they are. Everybody knows Batman. Everybody knows Superman. And those characters have been artificially propped up and held by the corporate comics industry, when by now their cultural relevance should have faded and other things should have eclipsed them. And that's where I feel that creative glut has kind of clogged up the culture in comics, especially in that it's Batman, it's Superman, it's Wonder Woman, it's Green Lantern. These characters, none of these characters need to fade away so that new characters can rise. They're the current ceiling that's holding things back a little bit. But because there's something that changed, and we are such a nostalgia-driven culture now, that we can't let go of those characters. Our grandparents were able to let go of Flash and Buck Rogers and the Shadow, but we can't let go of Batman. We can't let go of Superman. They're still held up high. And I think that's concerning, but it's growing less and less concerning the more I see what you're talking about, which is this shift. And it's slow, and it's steady, but you're seeing it slowly move a different direction where independent media of every way, shape, and form is growing larger. More books are being sold than ever before. Fewer people are reading them. But the more interesting thing is with the Bantam lawsuit that came out, their numbers were released, and for every 10 books that they sell, only 2 do significant volume. Most indie authors outsell 80% of what publishers are putting out. That's amazing. And that should be a giant klaxon ringing across the publishing industry that there's a massive problem coming ahead, but they won't listen. The same way the comic book industry didn't listen when their sales started to slag, and they didn't look to reasons. The same way Hollywood doesn't pay any attention to what's going on with them. It's the constant problem of the corporate's not going to pay attention, but the smaller guys are looking, because the smaller guys are, any small guy that wants to be successful, be contrarian. You did this. You look at the price of what they're selling for a comic book, you're going to go, you got 2 choices. I can go higher or I can go lower. Customers with millions or millions of customers. You picked, I'm going to drop my price lower. It's contrarian. Nobody else is doing it. What happens? Alterna booms and becomes huge. And everybody in the comic industry, you've seen Alterna. Alterna's out there. You're pushing it. It's that contrarian mindset. And I see that more and more in the indie sphere of people taking well, if this isn't working for them, I'm going to try this, which is the exact opposite. And boom, success, almost instantaneously.
Yeah, you got to zig when they zag. You got to fill the vacuum. And the thing is, too, is what you're talking about in regards to the mainstream characters and things like that. I think the reason that we see this prolonged, in some ways artificial longevity is due to the transition of mediums. So they've grown past the mediums in which they dominated, and now they're moving towards a different medium. So I would argue that, in essence, comic book industry wise, I think you're pretty correct in terms of they've obviously run their course. They're shadows of what they used to be. The companies, the creators out there that are working on them, they don't know what the hell to really do with them at this point to give them the same level of staying power and iconic nature that they used to easily attain. But now they're finding some of that stature back in film, TV, whatever it may be, video games. So they've transitioned past the medium in which they were born in. But for some reason, that medium refuses to let them go, and those companies refuse to let them go too. When, if anything, honestly, they should probably just let them go at this point, go into recycling and reprinting of the classic quality stories that they had, and just let it be at that, and transition fully, as well as companies, away from being comic book oriented, which they just it's so apparent that it's just kind of this weird thing that they put the stuff out to almost anger the base and dominate the space so that nobody else can get in there and then grow and then compete with what they're actually making money in, which would be the films, the merchandise, etc. So they eat up the space, they eat up the retail market on that, and it's all crippling that side of it. So, and they're basically pulling that ladder up as soon as they climb up. So it's not doing any favors to the medium of comic books, and it's not really helping the industry to grow. And if anything, it's doing a lot of the reverse, which is why I think we're seeing a lot of people, even myself, being in the system with Diamond and other distributors.
Right.
I was like, I can't do anything within this system. If I want to do what I want to do and what will work, I have to go outside of it, because the system at this point is so solidified in being what it is and what it's going to do, and it's never going to change. It's not going to respond to the market. It's not going to grow. It's not going to try to fix the problems that are there. It instead is going to keep doing whatever it's doing, getting blood from a stone until implosion, perhaps. So I have to leave that. And I think we're seeing a lot of people in the independent sphere also going, you know what? I see the problem. I'm not even going to get involved. And so there's a lot of creators out there that are instead utilizing other avenues to get their stuff out and going fully independent, or as much as they possibly can, which I think is really what is spurning that entire process of what we're seeing, which is great. And that's the part that really gives me hope, is because in order for us to actually do anything that's going to have any staying power, we really have to understand that you can't really play within the system that's there and expect to change that system and have it work for you. It's going to be incredibly difficult, because that system is not built for you to succeed. So there's no point in trying to tear down that system or spend a lot of time complaining about it and still be within it and suffer and then close shop. So it's better to just get out of it, set up something different, and then hopefully other people will follow if you're doing something that rings true to them. And I think we're seeing a lot of people where it does ring true, and they're following the crowdfunding way, the selling direct on their website way. Hell, I'd rather just do convention tours at this point than go back to distribution and do that whole system. I don't know how anybody can stay within that system at this point. It's so broken.
No, and it's a mutual parasitic relationship between the distributor and the LCSs. They've created this strange situation where they depend on each other to the point that they're spiraling the drain. And I don't know I had one LCS near me that's primary income was still comics, both back issues and new issues. And they recently have gone into like old action figures and D&D stuff, because they finally this year couldn't make it just on comics anymore. So I've got 9 shops that I regularly visit within about a 2-hour drive. And so every one of them now is comics are not their primary. Well, the thing that happens slowly over time is that beautiful back issue collection that they were constantly feeding by buying collections, it starts to dwindle, because I'm not making my money on comics anymore. So you walk in, and 1 year 2 more long box rows are gone, and then 2 more long box rows are gone, and 2 more, until finally they've got just maybe a handful of back issues and all the new crap on the wall that hardly anybody's buying. And it's all action figures and D&D and Funko Pops and Squishmallows and stuffed animals, and whatever the new fad is, that's what they have to get in just to get foot traffic. And it's tragic.
And it doesn't even need to be necessarily connected to the other realm of whatever it is that they're putting out. Eventually, I wouldn't even be surprised if a lot of these comic shops If they haven't done so already, they should probably think about it. But even trying to get, appeal to the local sports team type audience,
Right.
to come in and get that crossover market to sell sports memorabilia and everything else. I mean, when I was growing up, that's what a lot of the shops by me had. It was kind of that mix. You get the sports trading cards, you got various. It wasn't fully stocked with a bunch of things, but there was some memorabilia there. There was figures and whatever else, and now we're kind of seeing this weird unfortunate lull in the industry where there's so many shops that they don't want to necessarily carry anything new, and I don't blame them at all. But if I'm making new comics, and there's a lot of shops that aren't going to carry that because of the fact that they're not making the money from the top 2 to 5 publishers, that doesn't bode well for me. So you have to find that different system, and I think a lot of people are, which is great. I just want to answer really quickly. Movie world, I would say, man, that's tough. I'd say it's anywhere between 1,200 to 1,500 people, but the thing is, they're not all buying like the same issue. So it's 1,200 to 1,500. Like 500 are buying that one, 200 are buying that one, 600 are buying. It's that kind of a thing. So. But in overall, I'd say roughly it's 1,200 to 1,500. That's 1,200 to 1,500. But yeah, it's and we sell direct. We don't have any more distribution. I pulled out of distribution a while ago, and it's just what a nightmare it was. What a depressing nightmare it was. Holy smokes. But yeah, so the stuff that you're really talking about here with like this golden age of creativity, not just a golden age of comics. Is that something that you've always been interested in, or did you come across that later on? How did that work out?
Well, I'm a third generation comic book fan. My dad really early on got me into comics. In fact, earlier you were talking about you had that Spider-Man issue from when you were a kid. I just recently replaced my G.I. Joe issue 31, which was it's got Destro on the cover. He burst in through a door. I think it was from January of '85. I remember having that as a kid, constantly reading it to the point that I still have the original issue, and it's barely held together. Every page is crumpled. It kept on getting shoved in the back of Mom's seat in the back of the Buick Regal. I just read that I just replaced it, and that's one of the cool things about comics is replacing some of those beat up old classic books that you love, so you get a nice clean copy. But no, my dad got me into books at a young age, kind of until he found one I really dug, and then, I read that. My grandfather, actually, we've got a picture. He was drafted and went to Korea, and in '52, I've got a picture of him sitting on the back of a deuce and a half truck reading a copy of Fighting Marines. And it just so happened last year, Cecil was doing a comic book auction, and he pulled out that issue. And
no way.
I imagine, like, real quick super chat, like, dude, put it aside. We'll talk after. And so he said, oh, yeah, okay, because I edited Cash Grab. So he put it aside, and he talked, and he goes, no, I'm just going to send it to you. If it means that much, I'm going to send it to you. And we'll just consider it part of your payment. And so I got that issue. And that was huge. Like, it's just one of those, it's a 3-generation, harkens back to something my grandfather read when he was in war. But no, so third generation, I started reading the stuff in the the 80s, kind of stopped by about the mid 90s, both because of sports, girls, school thing. Still read occasionally, but kind of drifted away. When I came back, I was reading some of the graphic novels and stuff that were the big epochs of the 80s and 90s. Killing Joke, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, a lot of the stuff that I missed as a kid. Watchmen. And I started kind of going back like, oh, well, especially Watchmen. It was, well, these characters are based on the Carlton characters. I kind of knew that story. Man, I'm going to go back and read a little bit about the Carlton characters. And so I started grabbing the Carlton characters, and I read some of that. And then I went, well, so some of this stuff's Ditko, and Ditko did this. So I went back and started reading more about Ditko, and, oh, he started this. And, oh, man, he was involved in this comic strip, and he worked with Kirby and Sanat over here. And, again, man, everything's a rabbit hole. The minute you start finding one thing, you find another guy, and then you follow that. And, you follow Kirby's story, eventually you get to Hal Foster, and the minute you see Hal Foster's art, you remember it immediately, because as a kid, you'd read the Sunday comic pages in the newspaper, and there was that boring strip in the corner that was, it wasn't Garfield, it wasn't Ziggy, or well, not that Ziggy was ever funny, but it looked more adult, and you just kind of ignored it. At least I did when I was 6. And then you kind of start going back and you start checking those out, and you're like, oh my God, these are amazing. And it was still running. It's still running now. And the fact that Foster drew it until the 70s, like he drew that strip for 40 years. And then you get into the EC stuff and the history, the pre-code, and then pre-code's amazing because there's this glut of superhero stuff that you're familiar with after the comic books code. You hit the pre-code and you won't believe it because you grew up during the code, so you're not used to seeing the implied violence and the horror, and you're like, my God, these books are amazing. And from the 50s. And then you go, well, where did they come up with this? And then you start going back, and it all goes back to the pulps. And that's where these guys got their ideas, and half of them were writing for them, or half of them were doing ink drawings for them. And it's just a never-ending rabbit hole. The more you go, I still learn stuff every day. Every little research project I put myself on, it's just another avenue of experience and exposure. I had the privilege with Phil from Zaid Comics in April to sit down, and we had a dinner and a talk with Jim Steranko. And Jim just talked for 3 hours and furiously taking notes. I've got like 7 more things that I can go down because you ask him a question and he goes on for 45 minutes and he's just rattling off names. And you're like, man, I've heard him. Whoa, who's that? Wait, make a note. Go home and research. And he's like this amazing artist that was in his 60s, in the 50s, that Jim remembered and had a chance to talk with once, and he got this great idea from. And it's, again, everything spirals, and everything's an interconnected web of who was inspired by who, where people source ideas from. And then you take that, and then you apply it to, like, the indie scene right now, and you see it happening. Like, Nefarious was just in chat, the Global Frequency Studios. He's got, like, writers working for him, and they've got, like, a little writer shop where they kind of pass stuff around amongst each other, and everybody, oh, man, try this. What about this? Here's an idea. What if you did a story like this? And so everything builds, everything nests, and it's the fun, it's the excitement, and most importantly, it's the passion. In fact, there was a guy that recently dropped like a 30-second video of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that he did at home. And it's the best thing I've ever seen since I was 10 and saw the original movie. And the reason it's better than any movie that they can drop 50 or 75 million on is because that guy's not doing it for a job, he's doing it for passion. And passion will always trump capital. And so that's the thing that the indie scene has right now. Everybody that's working for mainstream is working. Everybody that's doing indie, man, they're doing it because they love it. Because if you had to justify financially why you're here, you couldn't do it. The only reason to stay is pure passion. You want it. You want it so bad you're going to keep on working for it. And that works both ways. That keeps a lot of the people that try and don't have the effort, the energy, or the ability, that keeps them out. Because they'll try and they'll fail. And they don't know that, man, failures, Dylan said it. There's no success like failure, and failure's no success at all. If you haven't fallen on your face 5, 6, 7 times, you're never going to succeed.
Yeah, it's a war of attrition.
Yeah, and that's the great part about the Golden Age, man. A lot of these guys, Kirby and Sanat failed like 4 or 5 times before they ever hit it. And they just kept on grinding. Why?
Yep.
Because they loved it.
It reminds me of literally in the intro to the show with the Rocky speech.
Yeah.
It's about how many times can you get hit and keep moving forward. And that's how you're going to get that win and done. And those that get hit once, and then there's many of them, and I've met many of them over my 17 to 18 years in comics. They talked real big, and then they got that one hit, in terms of not success, in terms of a stumble, an obstacle in the way. And they're like, that's it. I can't do it. All right. It was like, wow, okay. And it's most of the time wasn't even anything that big. It'd be pretty small. Like maybe I was talking about this yesterday. I've known either 2 or 3 creators where they lost like a letterer. And that was it. That was it for them. They already had the art done, everything up with the letterer. 3 pages in, couldn't do it anymore or whatever it was. And then they just stopped making their comic. And I'm like, wow, man. Wow,
Yep.
that's all that took. Wow. Man, oh man. Vero Frady, what's up? Says, had a signed copy of The History of Marvel Comics by Stan. Fun book.
Oh wow, that's
1974. Wow.
that's a fun one. Yeah, Vero, if you want to find a great resource, find Jim Steranko's The History of Comics, Volume 1 and 2. You can probably find them online PDF. I'd recommend you buy it yourself a copy, though. And you can buy them in rough shape, but still readable, fairly affordably. But those are phenomenal resources. And Jim had access to everybody at the time. Plus, I mean, he was there. He sat down in a chair next to all the greats at one time or another. So he knew them all. They'd all talk to him. And he's got and his memory is still sharp as a tack. So he's got all the stories and it's all in there. And you get the real impression early on, the kind of the 10,000 foot view of how everybody was interconnected and everybody was sourcing back to this, that, or the other thing. But it all goes back to like a handful of guys in the 30s that are really just the nascent form of what everything became.
Yeah, I mean, they essentially created an entire industry. And that's why I think it upsets a great deal many people when we see people like that getting trampled on. We're going to take a quick break here just for about a minute and a half. You're watching Comic Book Radio. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. Tonight, my guest is Aldous on the Farm. We'll be right back in a minute and a half. Don't go anywhere.
The Civil War was America's bloodiest conflict. Over 500,000 died to preserve national unity. When the war ended, Confederates like Harley Brogdon headed west, shooting game for the Army and gambling. When a card game turns deadly, Harley shoots in self-defense, killing the card sharp who threw down first. Wilfred Knorr, the card sharp's wealthy father, will stop at nothing to see Harley hang. Harley flees to Cobb's Gap, an old silver mining town at the foot of the Rockies. A remarkably peaceful town, especially after dark. But the sheriff harbors a dark secret, and no one dares go into the mines anymore. Cobb's Gap is full of secrets. People speak in hushed tones of something in the mines. Something worse than their cursed sheriff. Something even the Indians fear. Tired of running, Harley falls in love with a local widow with secrets of her own. But when Knorr's posse arrives seeking vengeance, the stage is set for a showdown with unimaginable horrors from the deepest pits of hell. And every secret will be exposed. Eisner winner Mike Barron and acclaimed illustrator Pat Broderick present one of the weirdest westerns that Comic Dom has ever seen. Bronze Star, a thrilling tale of love, revenge, and supernatural terror from the minds of two legendary creators. It's not the monster you're looking for. Order your copy at bronzestarcomic.com.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back to Comic Book Radio. Looks like we got a couple Aldous fans here in the chat. And Proby with some kind words. And Fritzy says, Barron is a legend. Yeah, that's Mike Barron's book. Little trailer there for Bronze Star.
Yeah, you can't get any better than Barron, man. He's just an absolute legend, and it's fantastic that he's over here doing his own thing.
Yeah, he's got some good stuff. Absolutely. Let's see. Fritzy's asking, is Aldous enjoying a nice frosty mug tonight?
Of Soma? No, I have not taken my Soma today. I just finished my 5 minutes of hate right before the show started. So.
There you go. All right. I'm going to be putting a link here in the chat in case anybody wants to join tonight. If you've got a question or comment for my guest, feel free to stop by. And don't be shy.
No, absolutely not. Love to talk to everybody, man.
Yeah.
And you played the preview for Barron's next book, which is, of course, a Western. And I love Westerns. Anybody that's followed me, I mean, Steve Dye and I are slightly renowned for last fall. We had like a mega long stream where we started drinking and just arguing about Westerns for like 4 hours. But the Western is, it's much like comics in a way, in that it is quintessentially American. And it's evolved. And the Italians made, of course, the spaghetti Westerns, which kind of added to the genre in and of themselves, much the same way that the French took the comic book and made bande dessinée and have made that their own. And then the Japanese have made some Westerns that are really wild, and they've taken comics and made manga. And everything evolves, but it all sources back to this very simple American concept of just doing whatever you want, which is the quintessential basis for the American West. And it's fantastic to see that coming back, because anytime you see westerns coming back, that's a great harbinger that you're going to see more stories about individuality. And when you start seeing more stories about individuals, that means individuals in the indie sphere, creators are coming up and making them, because you don't get stories that are based around the individual very often from corporate entities.
Absolutely true. You know, it's that bit of true Americana, and it kind of stirs up everyone's emotion for that kind of thing. And it's true. It's about seeing people who are self-sufficient, about seeing people who are out there on their own, carving their own path, up against impossible odds, and doing what it takes. And you know, once you start seeing stories like that, it really starts to reflect upon everything else, and you want to just see more of that, because it speaks to us. You know, I don't think this kind of stuff where we're seeing so much of it that's relatively forced upon people, that it's more about creating the thing that should be popular, or that's the thing that you should like, or you should be into it, as opposed to responding to what's resonating with people. We're not seeing a whole hell of a lot of that nowadays in the corporate sphere, but I think we're starting to really see a lot of that through the indie sphere. And I think that's what made a lot of the stuff that's now iconic. I think that's what made a lot of that so successful, is because it resonated with people, and then they gave them more of that. You know, they didn't just go, no, you know, I know that resonates with you, I know people seem to like this, but we're just not really going to give them that. We're forcing this upon them because we need to hit some ESG quota.
Absolutely. You know, it's like last night I mentioned on the gutter, we were talking Justice Society of America, All-Star Comics. Epic. I mean, they're the first comic hero team ever assembled. Gardner Fox wrote it. Absolute legend. Again, one of those guys, an absolute polymath. He was a lawyer, registered with the New York bar, practiced law, got bored with that, decided to write comics, because of course you do. That's the obvious thing that you do in 1940. And so he started writing comics, and this is a guy that created Barbara Gordon. He created Hawkman. I mean, the number of creations that this guy did was just phenomenal. But that book only ran for 57 issues. If you were a fan and you grabbed issue 57, then you went to the store and you got issue 58, issue 58 wasn't All-Star Comics anymore. It was All-Star Western. They just stopped it and started producing Westerns, and for the next 12 years, you don't see any of the Justice Society until they bring them back. And then they reboot them, and then we've got all that story that leads into Crisis, which is about a 20-year span of time before DC kind of goes, whoa, wait a minute, we've created a mess, and they correct it. And then Byrne, because he's such a fan. John Byrne's a legend. He's involved in Crisis.
One of my favorites.
Dude, the editors didn't even realize there was an error. But in Justice Society, Wonder Woman was a member. And they retconned everything so that Wonder Woman was set modern. She wasn't set back then. And Byrne goes, but you can't do that. Wonder Woman was in Justice Society. And the editor's like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, she's in 3 issues. So he writes an entire Flash story in Flash Volume 2, Issue 130, where Flash and Hippolyta go back in time. They fix a problem. Hippolyta stays back, and she's the Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's mom is the Wonder Woman that's in the Justice Society. That's Byrne. That's all Byrne, fixing a massive continuity problem with one issue because he was that big of a comic fan.
Yeah, I don't think we have any of that today. I think they go, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
Man,
no, you get guys that would rather, pour their heart out for their own troubles in replacement of a character.
It's incredible. I mean, honestly, I didn't even realize how big of a John Byrne fan I was until one day I was just going through my entire collection. And it was the result of a recent trip to a comic shop that was having like a 50-cent issue sale for the back issues. And I just picked up a crap ton of everything that looked good to me. I come home and I got to sort through like 100-something comics. So I'm looking through and I'm noticing not only what I'm picking, but what I have in my collection. And I'm like, I had no idea that like 70% of what I have is John Byrne.
Oh, he's an absolute legend. And, if you doubt, if that story doesn't resonate with you with how much this man loves comics, he's well and beyond his peak at this point. He's an old man. He should be fading off into the sunset and enjoying his retirement. And instead, he's drawing for free X-Men stories that he's putting up online. He doesn't sell them. They're just there on his board. He just posts X-Men stories, and they're amazing because he looked at the new stuff and he went, oh, I don't like this. I'm going to do my own. And my favorite interaction ever was, I can't remember who was interviewing him, but somebody was telling, I think it was Perch, interviewed Sean Gordon Murphy and mentioned it. And it blew Murphy's mind. He's like, he's doing them for free? Well, why? Like, because he loves comics, man. Like, that's why. It goes back to that, it's pure passion. Passion drives it. He loves doing it. He loves telling those stories. And you don't get guys like that anymore. And if you're a Byrne fan, and you've never read it, and you're a Fantastic Four fan especially, probably his favorite work of mine is the Last Galactus story, which was never finished. It was serialized in multiple issues of Epic Illustrated, which was Marvel's attempt to rival Heavy Metal in the early 80s. And it never was completed. It is available fully online in a couple of spots. If you dig around, you can find it, and it is absolutely stunning. It is probably some of Byrne's best work. It really harkens back to that idea of what comic books can be in its infusion of philosophy, beautiful art, and grand storytelling. It is a stunningly beautiful piece it's tragic it was never completed.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that always drew me to comics was that trifecta. To see comics nowadays that are, I don't know, they're so. I'm trying to find a word that doesn't sound horrible.
Oh, it's fine. You can call them all the horrible names.
Well, they're just not. They're for the sake of sounding older than I even am. They're just not like what they used to be. And so, I loved cracking open a comic. And I'll show some of the ones that I brought to show today. But I loved cracking open a comic and right from the start, you're just sucked right into the story. There's poetic narrative. There's this philosophical kind of air to it. You're immediately thrown into the situation with what's happening, and just as stuff unfolds, you're on the journey with those characters, and it's not talking at you, and it's also not talking to you. You are an observer of this world that is occurring, and I loved that. That's the thing that really drew me to comics. Once we started. And it's not about breaking the fourth wall, but once it became this kind of everything was a wink, wink, nod, nod, haha, we're so aware that this is a comic, that this is fiction, that none of this matters, that this is it's all a joke, essentially. And everything was like, nothing could be serious anymore. Nothing could be, deep. Nothing could be meaningful. Nothing could try to draw not just emotion, but also incite some kind of feeling and thinking, critical thinking from the reader. Being presented with what's occurring in the story and having, you essentially react to it as an active participant. Once that kind of really disappeared largely from most of the mainstream comics, I just checked out. And again, I feel like it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're going to start seeing a lot of that make its way back in, because I think for no virtue of anything other than the fact that people would like to see that people have been missing that, and that there's so many people out there that when they see it again, they go, wow, I had no idea how much I love this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, if you really think about it, yeah, you do. You always have. It's just it's been absent for so long.
Right. Well, there is only there. I mean, I subscribe to the Jungian archetypes that were really simplified down by Joseph Campbell in A Hero of a Thousand Faces. That there truly is only one story. And I mean, you can argue that, and people have successfully argued against it. But at the 10,000 foot level, the super basic, we've only got 20 minutes to talk about. It is. There's only one story, and that one story is there for a reason. And whether it's Star Wars about the boy rising up to claim his birthright and defeating the evil, or it's King Arthur of the boy rising up to defeat the evil and claiming his birthright,
it's the
it works. Yeah, it works time and time again because it resonates in our soul, because those are the stories that were told around the campfire as we were hunter-gatherers, and it's a cultural epoch that just continues. And sadly, as the culture becomes more fractured, those stories mean less and less. And though you're unweaving the rug slowly of that binds, you need to have that tie that binds everybody together, and it starts with the stories and the myths that we all agree and find captivating.
I think it speaks to a part of us. It's in our DNA, and I think that they're trying to work real hard to push that out. But it speaks true once you hear it.
No, you've got to break it if you're going to break people. That's for sure. I will disagree with you slightly on the wink and the nod. It was done perfectly well in the 70s. It's gotten way over the top. My favorite example of the wink and the nod is Iron Man 127 by Leighton, Micheline, and Romita Jr., where Tony Stark has come home drunk and he's just ridiculed Jarvis. And then Jarvis issues his resignation letter. And the resignation letter you can read in the issue in one panel. The only problem is it's not Jarvis's resignation letter. It's actually Dave Cockrum's resignation letter that he issued to Marvel that they just changed the title and the signature on, and everything else rings true. That those are Cockrum's words. So I mean, a wink and a nod like that, it's underhanded and dirty. And Leighton came out and said that he didn't know it was being done. But stuff like that with 40 years hindsight, it's pretty cool that there's that level of internal myth and lore in a comic book with a wink and a nod.
Oh, yeah, well, no, that's not the wink and the nod that I mean.
No, I know for sure.
No, that kind of wink and the nod is fun Easter egg kind of stuff. The wink and the nod that I'm referring to is that level of we're all in on this joke together, right? That this is all just a big joke and none of it matters. That's the wink and the nod, and it's kind of bred a new kind of, and I hate to use the word fan because it doesn't necessarily seem like you'd have to be a fan to enjoy that, but it feels more akin to we've all become the bully on the playground that made fun of the kid for reading comics.
Oh, for sure.
And that's the wink and the nod. That we're all together. That this is all just dumb, meaningless, stupid stuff, right, guys? I mean, hey, why not? It's a comic book. You know, look how stupid they are. They're wearing spandex,
right?
You know, and it's that kind of a thing. And to kind of categorize noble qualities or aspirational qualities as corny and cheesy and that kind of drive, because everything must be in a gray area at all times. That kind of gray morality for everything. Some things it'll work and you can have compelling stories because you need different personalities. But once they start all having the same relative gray personality, that is hero, villain, doesn't matter. That's when I find you lose that powerful punch of storytelling, and you lose that seriousness that comes with certain things. You know, you have to let those serious, heavy moments hang. They can't all be just moments of levity right after something horrible has happened or something impactful, because you want to make sure it's not as heavy hitting or as intense as it should be. I mean, we've seen this not just in comics. This is kind of a thing that's really within the films, but it's something that I think is so sad, and it kicks me right out of it, and I'm sure it kicks a lot of other people right out of it too. But yeah, no, I love the internal kind of Easter egg wink and a nod to things, but the stuff I'm talking about is more like this kind of a mean-spirited, almost like it's not a hatred, but it's something more akin to a passive-aggressive jab at the comic book medium itself, and especially the superhero genre, or just even the hero genre unto itself.
Right. Well, when you're talking about that cost and like letting it hang, to me, there's nothing that hits that tone better than Amazing Spider-Man. Really, it's the whole if this be my destiny arc, 31 to 33, which is right at the end of Ditko's run on that, because he left in issue 38. But you got that great scene of Spider-Man underneath the machinery on cover of issue 33, and it was left off like he's gonna drown, man. He's if this be my destiny, man, I did the best job I could. And that was the epic level. I mean, I don't own the originals, but I certainly read them in the 90s on the reprints, and it was just, you don't get that kind of emotion. Or if you do, it's very rare anymore.
Yeah.
And back then it seemed to just be around every turn. And that's epic comic level stuff, and that's the power. That's what can be. That's what has been, and it can be again. You just gotta it all comes back to that passion and putting out a great product.
Oh yeah, yeah. Storytelling to last the ages. So I do want to do a quick little sharing of some of the stuff I've brought along tonight. So like I showed earlier, this is for my all intents and purposes my first comic, Spectacular Spider-Man 138. Yes, it is. And as you could see, I took some liberties. And then this X-Men, Uncanny X-Men issue.
Oh, nice, good old Claremont run. It doesn't get any better than
Silvestri, great stuff.
And Kayla, Comics and Cleve, asked a wonderful question on Twitter on Friday. And the question was, what do you miss most about 80s comics? And almost without any exception, the answer was the storytelling.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, so... Indie creators out there, if you listen to nothing else that I say tonight, man, pay close attention to that result. That's costing you backers as you release books that aren't good stories. Make sure your story is top notch. Art sells books. Story sells the next book. Thundercats.
Absolutely.
Those were so much fun.
They were a lot of fun. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, those are my jam, man. I loved the G.I. Joe and the G.I. Joe special missions. So many great Mike Zeck covers on those special missions.
Totally.
There's a great one with Wetsuit and Torpedo Climb. Oh, and Art. That is Art T-Bear's crowning achievement, man.
Right there.
281. I mean, I'm a huge Bishop fan, so 282 with his first appearance is fantastic. But that 281 book is awesome. 283.
Yeah, some of these were issues that my mom just picked up on the way because she worked next to a convenience store that had comics back in the day, and she would just pick up one every now and then. And then this is a freebie. I thought I'd share this one.
Oh yeah, the Go to War Against Drugs.
He goes to war against drugs. And then these were great. I was in a Radio Shack with my dad as a kid, and they had these, and I was like, man,
oh
yeah, those
are
fun.
Great. And a Tandy computer. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, those are awesome. And everybody laughs at stuff like that, but man, in 40 or 50 years, those issues are going to be they're going to be solid gold, because nobody held on to them. Everybody threw them away.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It really is like a just looking back at everything. Okay, so specifically these, right? Look, like they really did go all out to make it still a comic book.
Yeah,
it's it mattered. The graphic design mattered. The art mattered on it. I'll open this one up. You look inside and you're still like, yeah, they really still gave it their all to make a comic. Whereas like something like this nowadays would be viewed as like, just with some throwaway lettering and throwaway story and throwaway art and who cares and whatever,
Right.
And they're still going, yeah, we're going to make something of quality still. And this isn't, some big deal. This was something at Radio Shack. And and it's still, look at the damn art is friggin' great. Oh man, like I said, they don't make it like they used to. They don't make it like they used to.
I was just looking up those WizKids books. Those were drawn by Carmine Infantino and Chris Stone. How does Radio Shack get Carmine to draw books, man?
Seriously, yeah.
That is fantastic.
It's just it's a whole different world, a whole different world.
Oh man, that's just it's mind blowing. That'd be like getting. I don't even know. I don't think there's a legend now. I don't think there's that many legends left. I mean, you got a handful, but William Golden, getting William Golden to draw a Walgreens issue, like, what?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Seriously, right? It's I don't even know, man. I don't know. What a different world, and it just a wonderful time to be into comics. You can see why so many people were into comics, because whatever the heck you picked up, they made it like it mattered.
No, and we dealt with, I mean, you had the underground scene. I've got a really good episode that deals with the history of the underground scene over on The Gutter that I did. And it just brings it up to about the 70s. And, there's been multiple times, and whether it was Vaughn Bodie trying to break the ceiling or any of the guys, with Crumb out there in San Francisco trying to break the ceiling in the 60s and the 70s, it didn't really happen. I mean, you had the Paninis banging against that glass ceiling of corporate comics and distribution for years before ElfQuest ever took off. And it really wasn't until Eastman and Laird that you really saw an indie explosion. And then in the 80s, I mean, guys like Don Chin, who's still around and an absolute legend, he's still around in indie comics, still doing stuff. And Eastman and Laird, still around, they're still doing stuff. You've got, and the Paninis are still around. They're still doing stuff.
Yep.
Panini, actually, she's famous for being one of the first Red Sonja cosplays, and man, did she fill out that suit. She couldn't just draw, man. She filled out the armor quite nicely. But we've still got a lot of legends that are available to us, and there's a lot of lessons that you can learn if you listen to what they say, because they've been through it, and they've been through it without any of the tools that we have. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have YouTube. We've got all of these beautiful social media tools to reach out and connect with readers. All they had were cons and personal appearances and maybe the occasional VHF local cable television show with an interview, that maybe 12 people watched. It's just a totally different world. And when you look at the success that they had, and then you turn and you hear an indie guy now going, well, I'm just not going to make it. Like, well, why? Try harder, man. Like, what's going on? I mean, there's so many avenues. There's no excuses now.
Man, rarely do I, and I've had this experience as a publisher, even with people I've published, and rarely has it ever been you exhausted every possible avenue of what you could have done. Usually it's like you did the 2 or 3 that were the obvious, and then you sort of tried, you dipped your toe into the one, that was just outside your comfort zone, and then that was it. It didn't take off. It didn't, wasn't an instant success. It didn't catapult your sales immediately. And then that was it. All right, done. I tried everything. And I can't tell you how many guys I've talked to that was the mentality. And then I sit down and I'm like, okay, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could do the other thing, you could have that. I'm throwing all these ideas at them. And I'm like, I've tried this before, it didn't really work for me. If you want to try it, go for it. This I've tried before and it has worked, so maybe, stick with that. But hey, try anything. Any of these things speak to you that you think you could give it a shot. I can't tell you how many still would go, oh yeah, okay, I'll try. And then they didn't try a damn one of them. Right. And then they still come back and go, yeah, I'm never going to make it. It's not working out. Man, I can't wrap my head around it. And again, it kind of, it goes back a little bit into what we were talking about with storytelling and things like that. The stuff that resonates, I think it's the other thing too, when it comes to thinking outside the box to get out there. There's some people that can be creative with the storytelling. And then there's other people that don't take that same creativity and get out there with the business aspect of it, and they don't want to have that philosophy of no pain, no gain. It's not the easiest thing in the world to get outside your comfort zone with some of this stuff, and I get that. But if you never try it, if you're going to keep doing what you're doing and it's going to be, a very difficult time or having no success at any of it, and the result is that now you can't do the thing that you care about doing, I can't wrap my head around that. To me, it's like you throw everything at it that you've got and you hope some of it actually produces some kind of significant result, but you stick at it. You have to generally stick at something for almost an entire month repetitively to retrain yourself to build that habit, and there's a lot of people that they try it once and they give it up and that's it didn't work out, and there's a lot of really great talented people out there that I've known over 17 to 18 years in comics that they're not making comics anymore because they just couldn't wrap their head around that it's not just enough to make it. You got to go out there and you got to figure out a way that you can get the message across to people and you can let them know what you're doing and you can let them know how much you care about it and how passionate you are about it. And if you can't translate a lot of that to anybody at this point in time, the onus is on you and you failed yourself. And there's no reason. You got every tool at your disposal right now. Like you said, there's so many people that were coming up for decades that What did they really have? What did they really have? Everything was kept so, not even an arm's length away. Everything was kept at 100 feet away from them. And they were practically isolated in terms of what they were doing. You don't have that. You can just engage immediately with a potential reader.
Yeah, they're driving around with, copies they probably hand stapled themselves in a box in the trunk of their car, going to anywhere they can to sling books, day after day, day after day. And then finally when they hit it, it's like, oh, well, you hit it. Well, no, I just made it regionally. Now I want, or locally. Now I want to go regionally. And then once you hit it regionally, okay, now I've made it regionally. Can I get tri-state? Can I get the tri-state area? There's always more. And that's the attitude you always have to have. Whatever you've got right now, it can't be enough. And the flip side of that too is, Kirby said it best. Comics are going to break your heart. You're going to have more lows than ups. And if you don't believe me, Jack the King Kirby. Arguably, if there's 3 tent poles for Western comics, modern comics, it's Jack Kirby is one of them. Joe Kubert's the other, and I mean, you can argue, I'd say Wally Wood's the third because I subscribe to the Steranko school. But if those 3 guys, all of them were fired way more than they were ever hired. And that might not make sense, but if you look at their history, it does. Because there are days they get fired and the company doesn't act on it. Like, they go back to work the next day and everybody acts like it's okay. But they were all firebrands. They were all passionate and they didn't care. It was, I'm going to do it my way, and if you have a problem, screw you. And, that's why Jack and Stan didn't get along so much, especially towards the end, because Stan wasn't in it for the comics. Stan was in it for Stan. And Stan was in it for whatever was best for Marvel, which meant it was what's best for Stan. And, it's the other thing, man. The more you read about the history of it, the more you find out that some of the heroes that you love, they're not very heroic. They did a lot of shitty things. And, there's a lot of travesty, too. I mean, guys like Wally Wood, he had a stroke in 1978. He lost the use of one eye. And he ends up taking his own life 2 years later on Halloween night. It's devastating when you read about what some of these guys had happened to them towards the end of their career. Wolfman ended up, Lin Wein, who created Wolverine, Wolfman, who created Ghost Rider, they both passed away in, retirement homes that were not much more than a prison. Because they didn't have any money, and both of them were sued by Marvel at one point. It's just
even the same thing with Cockrum too.
Yeah, absolutely. These guys created the world and then had the rug pulled out from underneath them by the corporate world. And God forbid, guys, if you're talented and you're out there and you've got something, do your own stuff. Make sure you own it. That's the greatest thing you can ever possibly do. Don't give in to the temptation of taking that easy road. It may be quick money now, but in the long run, it's going to take your soul. If you don't own it
and it's popular, make sure everyone knows that you made it.
Mm-hmm.
Too many of these guys, I see them, they're so resentful over it, and I don't blame them. But it's the difference between their independently owned thing taking off and getting attention and not. So utilize the fact that, at the end of the day, you might feel the way you feel towards that company or whatever had happened. But, man, scream from the rooftops that you're the one that made that thing. You're the one that created that character. And that'll get you access into getting more attention for the thing that you now own and are creating. It'll make people go, oh, wait a second. I love that character. You made that? I got to give this a look. I got to give it a shot. And that's a huge thing that I see so many out there that they're not doing any of that, and it's unfortunate. But again, when it comes to the independents that are not the ones that created anything that was iconic at some corporate company, I'm seeing so many people, and Sheldon, you nail it here. It says the guys that really made an impact, it wasn't a matter of resources, it was a matter of resourcefulness. And that's what I'm seeing right now with so many independent creatives that are being so resourceful in terms of maybe they don't have a lot of money or a lot of time or a lot of experience, whatever it may be. But, man, they are being creative. They're being resourceful with what they could do to get out there. And they're making sure that people know how passionate they are about not only what they're creating, but why they're creating it and what they plan to do in the future and their hopes and aspirations for this. And it brings you into the process as well. And that's the part of it that's great. It's a symbiotic thing. And the corporate level doesn't want you to know that it's symbiotic, that they need you in a way, even more than you need them. So they have to really listen to their customers, their readers, their whoever's there that's supporting them. Because once you guys go away, That's it. But that's the thing is I'm seeing it so much with independence, and it's a beautiful, inspiring thing to see. So don't feel attacked. Don't feel attacked. My speech about people kind of giving up too easily or not pursuing enough of the options that may be there, or thinking creatively enough about them. If that rings true to you and you feel attacked, then I hope the words hit hard, and I hope you're able to bounce back and go, you know what? Yeah, I could do it. If for any other reason, and I've told people in the past at Alterna, the creators that aren't here anymore anyway, with Alterna, do it to spite me.
There you go.
Just
Spite and anger are great motivators.
Yeah, do it to spite me, and then go, Pete, I did what you told me to do, and it still didn't work. Now what, Mr. Genius?
Right.
Do it to throw it in my face that you did it. You did all the things we discussed, and then you threw it back at me and said, still didn't work. At that point in time, I'll say, well, maybe your book just stinks. But at least you've done it. And I guarantee, though, if people do it, if they give it their all, if they try every opportunity that they could think of, if they try every angle to try to be successful or to get that book out there, to get it in front of people, to get more attention on it, I guarantee you will find multiple avenues before you that weren't there before, and now they are. And you're going to go, wow, crap, there's a whole other path that I could go down. And but it is a shame. I've seen far too many talented people, hardworking comic creatives that just didn't think the same level of work needed to be applied to let people know about what they were making.
Oh, for sure. If you're incredibly talented, you know what? Even if you're not incredibly talented, people less talented than you succeed every day, just out of pure drive and passion. It doesn't take talent to succeed. It's a whole different engine that runs a different part of the mind and a different part of the soul.
Yep.
And everybody's got it in them. It's not the kind of thing it's not like drawing or writing where it takes years of effort. No, man, all you got to do is just change your outlook. And it sounds hard, but it's pretty easy. You just kind of take a day at a time, like Pete said, in 30, 60 days, you do it long enough, and it becomes a behavior pattern. Once it's a behavior pattern, it's there. And that's the history of comics. Look back at what the successful guys have done, whether they work at a big company or like Marvel, and really Marvel isn't big in the sense of how we consider it today until really the late 60s. If you look at the history of Marvel and DC, and even DC wasn't always DC. The National Comics, the guy that was running that, he was being published through, I can't remember the publishing house at the moment. The owner of the publishing house, he owed him money, so he sent the guy on a cruise, and by the time the guy got back, he's like, yeah, the company's mine. National Comics is just mine. And then he bought out the All-American Comics, and that's what created DC. But, man, both those guys, they busted their butt, and they couldn't figure out, wow, we're doing okay, but we just can't break that wall. And it took somebody else buying them and doing a different angle from it. And then, boom, where are we at now? Action Comics #1, Detective Comics #1, Batman and Superman, still cultural zeitgeists. Sadly, like we talked about earlier, they need to fall upon that shadow. And that doesn't mean go away completely, because the shadow is still here. Doc Savage is still here. I'm still talking about him because pulp never dies. Because heroes don't die. But they need to fade a little bit. And we need to have new cultural icons. And hopefully those cultural icons are positive and uplifting, like the ones that we've had for 200 years in this country.
Oh, absolutely. And, I'm sorry to hear about your losses. My heart goes out to you, man. I hope that you do find some renewed vigor to create again, and that stuff happens, and it'll derail the best of us. But I'm confident that you'll find the path again, man. Keep it up. And sure. Paulus says that in and of itself does take time, though. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And that's the thing, is that at the end of the day, before you ask anybody else to invest in you, you have to invest in you. Are you worth it? Do you believe you're worth it? I believe that you believe you're worth it. So put in that investment. Will says, former talent at the Big Two doing crowdfunding now. I'm not surprised. Yeah, and that's how it is. we're seeing that across the board because they're like, that other way ain't working. That ain't working for me. So you're going to do what it takes to keep on doing what you've been doing. And you're going to find new avenues, and at first, is it a little painful, that to experience new growth? Yeah, it's always going to be a bit painful. But eventually, it like everything else, it becomes, I've been doing this for 5 years now. It's easy peasy. It's like second nature. Man, oh man. Thank you tonight so much for the conversation. It's been great. Time flew. It's an hour and 16 or so.
No worries,
thank you, everybody. Man, it was great. Thank you, everybody in the chat.
Thank you for having me on. To everybody in the chat, thanks. Got 52 viewers. I'm humbled. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully, something I said resonated, and you're going to check some stuff out. And, that's the great part about comics is they've been around for a long time. You've got over 90 years of wonderful, wonderful books out there, and they can all be checked out. You can check out a bunch of other cool stuff that inspired them, like pulps online for free. Please, by all means, go out and whatever you do, just read.
Absolutely. Read and continue the comic conversation. Too many people are so scared of, don't talk about them. Don't talk about what you like or don't like. No, talk about what you like and don't like. Good Lord. All of this dies the moment people feel like they should stop talking about it.
Always talk about what you love.
Always talk about it.
If you hate something, if you can't stand what they're doing with something, the best answer is apathy. Talk about what you love. Don't talk about what you hate.
That's the thing, right? Silence is what kills all the things
golden,
that you, all the things that you don't like out there. If you're like, man, I don't care for that, silence will kill that far faster
Absolutely.
than getting out there and like devoting an entire, your entire life to pointing it out.
Negative, man. Yep.
Man, oh man. All right, everybody, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. It was a great conversation here with Aldous. And Aldous, man, thank you as well. Everybody go subscribe to Aldous's channels. Those links are in the description of the show. And as far as this show, tomorrow, I'm still waiting on confirmation from our guests for tomorrow night. If I do not hear from them, then it is what it is. But I got my fingers crossed that I will hear from them, and we'll have a show for tomorrow night. If we do, it'll be on at 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow. So see you guys then. Maybe, kinda, sorta. It's been once a week where I've had guests who either forget to show up or forget the time. So I'm hoping that this week we have a perfect week and we can have the person show up. But I don't want to just fire up the show if they're not going to be here. I'd rather finish fulfillment and packing up orders, which I'm going to literally be doing right now.
Awesome.
So, everybody, thanks again. Have a great night. And Aldous, have a great night as well. I'll talk to you in the near future, my friend. Take it easy.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right, everybody, good night.
Take it easy.